we've got a man who runs a really successful school, John Murphy. I mean, is that right?
I just think it's really interesting when we're talking about people as if there's one type of person. I think what we're really doing is we're serving very diverse communities now, and there should be a diversity in the sorts of schools that we're providing to give people those choices. But equally, behind all those stories, there's always a human person, you know, there's a person there sometimes crying out for support. That's why they'll constantly contact the school.
But what we're getting here from some of the teachers is a sort of sense that parents can be just a pain in the neck and pushy. And would they just back off and leave us to get on with our jobs?
Completely appreciate it. But, I mean, one of the things that we are doing within Oasis is we're looking at a multi-agency approach. So say, for example, a parent may have special needs, they may not be able to read, they come into the school, they can't access the school report, so that face-to-face interaction is absolutely key for them to be able to support their child in the education system, in the same way providing health services, so we can then provide health direct to the families, which again has an impact for their own students.
Fiona? I mean, someone who's been very involved with your school, I mean, what did you see as your actual role there?
Well, I think as a chair of governors, I would give every parent my email address. And if they want to phone me, if they've got a problem, they can do. I mean, I just think it's very important that schools are open to their parents. And I accept that parents can be quite difficult at times and seem very irritating. Sometimes it's because there are very serious problems at home and you're actually not getting to the heart of the problem. Other times they're just worrying insanely about their children, and there's so much anxiety amongst parents now. But I mean, I think you've got to remember that most families of school-age children have 2 working parents at the moment, and it's very difficult for them to get into school, and schools have got to really think hard about other methods of communicating with parents so they don't work themselves up into a lather of anxiety, feeling that they are being kept out and not being communicated with about their children's progress.
Let me bring in Gemma Lass. Gemma, where are you? What kinds of things could make this better? Because you're from Parent Line.
Yeah, Parent Line Plus. And I think what we're hearing from parents is that there's a real range of experiences and a range of good practice. So some of the barriers to parents participating and feeling engaged in their child's education are things like, as Fiona was saying, parents are working, parents' evenings aren't necessarily in the evening, so parents can't get there. And I agree with what Rachel was saying, technology has opened it up so there's now much more frequent communication in some cases, but the quality of that communication isn't always there, so parents feel even more disengaged with copied and pasting and standard sentences.
But what does that mean? How does technology help beyond being able to email your teacher? And most teachers won't give out their email address and phone numbers, will they? So...
Well, that's what I'm saying. You have to be very careful about how you use technology, because sometimes that can make parents feel even more alienated because things aren't necessarily personalised.
Yes, the lady there.
We work with the parents that you'd love to come into your school and can't get there because they find school really hard to reach. And I think that you know, the few who are the verbose ones aren't the many, and we need to find ways for all parents to be able to engage. And Fiona's right, it's the engagement rather than the involvement. And the research shows that if you spend 2.5 hours a day asking your child what they did at school, they'd have an achievement improvement of 15%. If you spend 2.5 minutes asking the same sort of questions, they'll have an improvement achievement of 15%. So let's help parents ask the right questions, feel safe doing so, and being able to get some response to when they do have really serious concerns.
I mean, John, is the truth that actually most parents aren't very engaged? You know, that you get pushy parents, but they're the minority.
It's quite interesting with a story that's just come from the audience, because I took over a school for students with emotional and behaviour difficulties. We had 110 boys who'd been permanently excluded. And I got ready for my first parents' evening. I had my script ready. I was really, really excited. And I sat there for the first hour, just waiting, and not a parent turned up. And then finally, a lady turned up who was Somali and didn't speak English. And I thought, I'm going to have to do things very differently. And that led me then to do a home visit to every single parent. And what you have to do is you sometimes have to take the education and that warmth to the parents, instead saying, yes, we do care. Exponentially after that, parents then felt welcome because they know a face and they know a person, and you're fostering the positive relationships all the time. But we're talking about lots of different things here. We're talking about communication with the school. We're talking about parents having the opportunity to track their child's progress. They're talking about when there are downtimes and when there are good news. A lot of schools, unfortunately, exponentially, they spend a lot of their time focusing on reporting poor things rather than spending the same amount of time actually saying, well, actually, we're really pleased this has happened.
Well, the parents' evening is is still a huge problem, isn't it, Mary Bassett? I mean, and it hasn't really changed in an awful long time.
No, and it's, I mean, my experience of a teacher is the parents that you desperately wanted to see often didn't turn up. But I've got quite a funny story, actually. I remember one parents' evening where there was a very, very over-involved parent, and, you know, they were meant to have 5 minutes, and this parent, I couldn't get her off the chair in front of me for 15 minutes, and then the parent afterwards said, Mrs. Bassett, can I just ask, did the parent before me know her daughter? I said, you know, because it was almost like, you know, and is she breathing OK during the lesson? So, but the ones that you really want to see, often you don't. And that's why online reporting and the ability to use IT to facilitate communication is really important. There are dangers there for teachers. Teachers are the victims of the misuse of IT, and so there have to be protections. And I did hear, for example, of a school where it was a requirement, the head teacher was saying it was a requirement that every teacher gave out their home telephone number. Well, that's wrong. Teachers have a right to a private life too. There should be professional boundaries, but within that, the most engaging ways to actually engage with parents need to be found.
Can I bring in Professor Stephen Heppel? Do you think parents are getting pussier, and is it a good thing?
No, I'm sitting here slightly astonished. We were chatting before, wondering who could possibly think you could do education without engaging parents. I mean, education now is so complex. If we're going to keep up with the progress that countries are making all around the world, we just need all hands on deck. You know, we need reflective practitioners in the classroom, and we need parents reflecting too. And we've locked parents out of this for so long. You know, every parent wants the best for their child. They sit down and try and read a story where they can read. We haven't helped them knowing how to read. And what do? Do you point to the letters? Do you sound things out a bit? Do you summarise the page at the end? This has all been secret knowledge we monopolised. Suddenly now we're in a situation where parents want to be part of that action. And absolutely, you know, the schools that are succeeding, like Toby's, are the ones where they've embraced the community, they've embraced the parents. And let's be clear, this isn't just parents. You know, I mean, half the nation's children have been brought up by their grandparents. I haven't seen a hint of government policy that looks to the extended family for support. That's where we should be focusing now.
I mean, a few people have mentioned the possibilities of technology and online reporting, and technology sort of one of your areas as well, isn't it? I mean, lay out how the future could look. I mean, what could you do?
Well, I mean, you know, over Christmas, you know, a lot of schools were snowed in. I was working with a group of children who were trying to complete a big project to present to a lot of ministers. Funnily enough, in January, the school was snowed off. They set up a Facebook group. They set up some Google documents. They swapped advice with each other and with their parents. They did a huge amount of work themselves on preparing their work. They even made little sort of YouTube videos of how to do the bits that they weren't very sure about. They invented a virtual school in the crisis of the snow, all on their own with their parents, and it worked spectacularly well. We've got great tools out there. What we've done, of course, is to pretend they're not there. You know, we've confiscated the phones, locked down YouTube and banned the networks. Absolute madness. We want all hands on deck for this. OK, well, hold that thought, because coming up after the break, we'll be talking to the parents who are setting up their own schools. Will the middle-class elites benefit at the expense of everyone else? Welcome back to The Big Debate. Now, until recently, if you weren't satisfied with your local schools, your only choices were to travel, go private or get religion. But now there's another option. Parents can set up their own state schools if they can prove there's a need.
We've needed a school here for many years, up to 40 years, and the situation now is even worse than it was 40 years ago because the population of this area has really grown.
There's no school in the centre of this community, which is a very, very dense area of housing. What that means is that our children, A, go to lots of different schools, which are the ones that are a mile and a half away. They don't go to one school. And B, they only get places at those schools if the people who are living closer to them don't want the places.
Legislation is there that allows parents to become parent promoters and to push the creation of schools in their communities forward. However, what we've found is that while that sounds great as a headline, the reality is much, much more complicated. You've got to be able to prove that there are going to be enough children to go to that school. That's incredibly difficult, and it involves the identification of a site, and it involves harnessing the will of your local authority and the national government to push that forward. Personally, I think the idea that parents are going to get together and set up schools is a mirage.
If we just sat back, nothing would happen, despite all sorts of promises from all sorts of people.
We have made a lot of progress, and if we stopped now, we would be giving up at a point when actually something might be about to happen.
It's a need and it's a right of the community, and so of course we won't give up. However, sometimes we feel like we're really beating our heads against a wall and not getting anywhere.
Toby Young, why are you doing this? Your local school gets a pretty good Ofsted.
Yeah, well, the problem is that there's a population boom in Ealing, where I live, just as there is clearly in Camden. There used to be 5 state schools serving the area I live, Acton, in Ealing, and the council, in its wisdom, when the population was falling, sold off 2 of them in the past 25 years. So now there are only 3. One's a faith school, one's an all-girls school. So there's really only one choice for parents like me in the area. And we know that in 5 or 6 years' time, the pressure on that school is going to be so great. I doubt I'd live close enough to get my children in. We desperately need a new secondary school in the area, just as they clearly do in Camden Town. So what kind of secondary school are we starting? Well, we don't want to just duplicate what's already available. We want to start something a little bit different, so parents have a genuine choice and can choose the school which is best suited to their child.
A sort of a posh secondary school that teaches Latin and things like that?
Well, I don't think that a school which teaches Latin should be dismissed as posh. I think that our aim is to set up what we're calling a comprehensive grammar. Which means we want rigorous setting, we want low tolerance of disruptive behaviour, we're going to have very high expectations, we want an old-fashioned model of pastoral care, a competitive atmosphere, but we want it to be available to all children, regardless of ability.
Fiona Miller, it sounds like, you know, a lot of parents dream school.
I don't know the school that doesn't want high standards and high standards of behaviour and high expectations, all the things that Toby said, and most schools are trying very hard to do that. I mean, my problem... I've actually supported the South of the Euston Road campaign for some time, and I think where there is a clear need for school places, clearly parents should be allowed to campaign to get new schools. My worry about this proposal is that some parents are campaigning for new schools in areas where there are enough places, and because the money follows the pupil, the context means that those schools will inevitably suck resources away from existing schools at a time when we're not going to have enough public money, frankly, to fund all our schools. And I think there's an alternative way of looking at this, which is that, you know, those parents, if they have got a local school they can get a place in, they get involved in that school and they work that way to turn it into the sort of school that they want and make it better.
We've made it very clear that we don't want to in any way take money that's already been allocated to Ealing Council. So they've got their BSF allocation.
Now, I'm talking about the revenue cost. You tend to muddle the two up, and I think it's very important to explain there's money to build new schools.
Right, but we'll only get
the money to run the schools comes by attracting pupils. Now, if you've got enough pupils to attract, it's fine. If you haven't got enough pupils to attract, you leave another school without enough pupils and... you know, with surplus places that aren't funding.
And we totally understand that.
Yeah.
And under the current rules, we won't be able to get a capital grant to build our school unless we can demonstrate that there's a genuine need for more secondary school places in the area, and that's what we're endeavouring to do.
I understand that your local authority has demonstrated that. And it is building a new school. It's just not building the sort of school that you want.
Well, it's not that. I mean, we don't really know exactly. I mean, they're having a competition. The competition hasn't been completed yet, so we don't know what kind of school it'll be. But the problem is that it's in Greenford, which is 3 miles away, and so you know, to have to send your child to a school 3 miles away is a wrench in a community like ours. We'd like the school to be on our doorstep.
But your objection is slightly remarkable as well, in that you're saying if he opens a school that's so good that everybody wants to go there.
No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just talking about
the comprehensive that nobody wants to go to will be disadvantaged.
Well, Toby's saying that everybody does want to go to this comprehensive, apart from him, of course. It's going to be so full in 5 years' time that nobody
in your
can get
scenario,
into it.
though, I mean, the point is, if a school's better, then why not let a bad one fail?
Well, because while schools fail, the children in them have a terrible time. And it's what almost happened to my children's school. And I can tell you it's not a pleasant experience. You lose money, you lose pupils. You tend to take in pupils who've been excluded from other schools, pupils who've got an awful lot of difficulties. And it becomes a very, very difficult job. And I think the pupils in that school also have a right to be protected in this process.